No one sleeps beneath the hanging tree unless the world has already decided they are gone. The old rope above Emily Carter's head swung in the northern wind, creaking softly against the dead branch as snow drifted over her eyelashes. For one terrible second, she did not know where she was. She only knew the cold. It pressed through her torn gray coat, slid beneath her collar, and settled deep in her bones until even breathing felt like lifting stone. Then memory returned in broken flashes. The packhouse lanterns, Madison Vale's perfect smile, the silver brooch pulled from Emily's narrow cot, as if it had been planted there by fate itself, and the Alpha's voice declaring that Raven Hollow would not be embarrassed before the king by a thieving Omega. Emily tried to sit up, but her hands sank into 4 inches of snow. The hanging tree stood at the edge of the territory, half a mile beyond the last trail marker, its black limbs twisted over the clearing like fingers that had forgotten how to bless. Children were warned never to come here after sunset. Adults passed it with lowered eyes. They said traitors once waited beneath these branches for judgment, and that the ground remembered every shame spoken over it. Tonight, Raven Hollow had given the tree a new shame to keep. Her. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and destiny, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love finds the broken. Now back to Emily. She was 18, pale from years of kitchen smoke and winter work, with light brown hair tangled around her face and eyes that had learned to look down before anyone ordered them to. In Raven Hollow, an Omega without parents was not a daughter of the pack. She was a burden they tolerated when there were floors to scrub, fires to feed, and dishes to wash after stronger wolves had eaten. Emily had been called quiet so often that people forgot quiet did not mean empty. She remembered every laugh, every shove of a laundry basket into her arms, every time Madison wrinkled her nose and said, "Bad blood always smells like smoke." But the worst thing was not their cruelty. It was how easily the others believed it. When the royal messenger arrived 3 days ago announcing that Alpha King Adrian Blackwood would pass through Raven Hollow on his way to the northern border, the pack had transformed overnight. Windows were polished. Banners were raised. Silver was brought out from locked chests. Even the road stones were swept clean. Nothing imperfect could be seen when the Winter King arrived. And Emily, to Madison, was the most visible imperfection of all. The brooch had been ceremonial, shaped like a crescent moon with tiny blue stones around the edge. Emily had seen Madison wearing it at breakfast. By sundown, it was found under Emily's blanket. She had tried to speak. She had opened her mouth with the truth trembling on her tongue, but Madison's friends were already whispering, and the Alpha's face had already hardened. "Enough," he had said. "Take her beyond the boundary. Let the forest decide what we will not. No claws, no chains, no public punishment. Just a ripped coat, a shove into the dark, and Madison's voice near her ear as they left her beneath the tree. Sleep well, little curse. No one comes here after dark." Now the dark had fully settled, blue and heavy between the pines. Emily curled her fingers into the snow and forced herself upright. Her lips were numb. Her right ankle ached from the walk, but nothing seemed broken. That almost made her want to laugh. Raven Hollow had not even cared enough to make sure she could not crawl back. They simply trusted the cold to finish what their judgment had begun. A sound moved through the trees. Emily froze. At first, she thought it was the rope again, groaning in the wind. Then it came again, softer, smaller, full of fear. A whimper. Her breath caught. She turned her head toward the base of the hanging tree, where the roots rose from the snow like old black ribs. Something pale shifted there, half hidden behind a fallen branch. Emily should have run. Every lesson in her life had taught her that survival meant staying small, staying silent, saving what little warmth she had left for herself. But another whimper came, and her heart answered before her fear could stop it. She crawled toward the sound, her palms burning against the ice. Beneath the branch lay a wolf pup, silver white, no bigger than a farm dog, one tiny paw caught beneath a twisted loop of old wire. Its amber eyes found hers, bright with pain and trust, so sudden it nearly broke her. "Hey," Emily whispered, voice shaking. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The pup trembled as she reached for the wire. Her fingers were stiff, clumsy from the cold, but she worked slowly, murmuring nonsense under her breath. the kind of gentle words no one had used for her in years. The wire loosened. The pup pulled free and collapsed against her sleeve. Emily exhaled, almost sobbing with relief. She tore a strip from the hem of her dress and wrapped the little paw as best she could. There, she breathed, gathering the pup beneath her coat. You and me, then. We'll be cold together. Behind her, far beyond the trees, a branch snapped. Then another. Human voices drifted through the snow, laughing quietly. Emily's body went still. Madison had come back. But before the first shadow reached the clearing, something much larger stepped between Emily and the dark. A black wolf emerged from the pines, enormous, silent, its silver eyes fixed on the intruders. Snow slid from its fur like moonlight falling off midnight. Around its neck gleamed a thin band of royal steel marked with the crown of the Alpha King. The black wolf did not growl at first. It simply stood there, vast and still, as if the forest itself had taken the shape of a guardian and decided Emily was worth protecting. Madison Vale stopped at the edge of the clearing with two boys from the pack behind her, all three wrapped in fine winter cloaks, while Emily knelt in the snow with a trembling pup hidden beneath her torn coat. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the wind in the branches, the soft creak of the old rope above them, and Emily's uneven breathing as she stared at the royal mark shining at the wolf's throat. She had seen that symbol only once, stamped in black wax on the messenger letter that announced the king's arrival. A crown above a wolf's head, the sign of Alpha King Adrian Blackwood. Madison saw it too. Her face lost its smug certainty so quickly that Emily almost wondered if the cold had stolen the color from her skin. That is not possible, Madison whispered. One of the boys took a step back, his boots crunching over frozen leaves. Madison, we should go. Quiet, she snapped, but her voice cracked. The black wolf turned his head slightly, and the boy went silent at once. Emily knew enough about royal wolves to understand what stood before her could not be ordinary. Wolves of the Northern Crown were raised beside kings, trained to cross battlefields, borders, and storms without fear. They did not wander alone. They did not guard nameless omegas. They certainly did not lower their massive bodies between danger and a girl Ravenhollow had thrown away. Yet this one had placed himself so close that the heat from his fur reached Emily's knees. The little pup under her coat shivered and pressed deeper against her chest. Emily lowered one hand to keep it calm, moving slowly, afraid the guardian wolf might mistake her touch for a threat. Instead, his silver eyes shifted toward her, and something impossible softened in them. Not gentleness exactly. Recognition. Madison swallowed hard, then forced a laugh that sounded thin in the open air. Emily, step away from that animal. You do not know what it is. Emily's fingers tightened around the pup. I know it is not the one who left me here. The words surprised her. They were not loud. They did not need to be. They rose from somewhere under all the years she had been quiet, somewhere bruised but still alive. Madison's mouth opened, then closed. The old Emily would have looked down. The old Emily would have apologized for taking up space in her own misery. But the snow had numbed her fear, and the pup's small heartbeat against her ribs reminded her that being weak did not mean being wrong. Madison stepped forward, lifting her chin. You were banished by our alpha. You have no right to anything on Packland, including that pup. Hand it over, and maybe I will tell them you wandered off before dawn. The black wolf moved before Emily could answer. One paw slid into the snow, not a lunge, not an attack, only a single quiet warning. The trees seemed to hold their breath. Madison froze as if an invisible wall had risen before her. The wolf's lips pulled back just enough to show what he could do, but he did not do it. He did not need to. Power, Emily realized, did not always announce itself by striking. Sometimes it simply stood in the way and refused to move. It is guarding her, the second boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. Madison turned on him. It is confused. Royal wolves do not get confused. The truth hung between them, colder than the storm. Emily looked down at the steel band around the wolf's neck. Along the edge, beneath a dusting of snow, a name had been engraved in small dark letters. Fenrir. Every child in the Northern Territories knew that name. The king's wolf. The shadow at his side. The creature said to obey no command except Adrian Blackwood's own voice. Emily's throat tightened. If Fenrir was here, then the king could not be far. That thought should have terrified her, and part of it did. The Winter King was a story told in lowered tones, a ruler as tall as a doorframe and as cold as the mountains beyond the border. They said alphas bowed when he entered a room. They said he could silence a halt without speaking. They said his wolf never chose wrong. Fenrir turned fully toward Emily then, his great head lowering until his eyes were level with hers. Snow clung to his lashes. His breath warmed her frozen hands. Slowly, carefully, Emily lifted her palm. Madison gasped behind him. "Do not touch him." Emily should have listened. A royal wolf could end her foolish courage with one snap if he wished, but his gaze never left hers, and beneath all the fear in her chest was a strange pull, steady as moonlight on water. Her fingertips brushed the dark fur between his ears. Fenrir closed his eyes. Then, before the girl they had called cursed, worthless, and unwanted, the Alpha King's wolf lowered his head until it rested at Emily Carter's feet. For one breath, no one moved. Madison stared at Fenrir as if the ground had opened beneath her polished boots. The two boys behind her looked from the royal wolf to Emily, then to the old tree, suddenly aware that the clearing they had entered for cruelty had become something far larger than their gossip, their games, or their fear of being seen as weak. Emily could feel Fenrir's head heavy against her feet, warm through the thin leather of her worn boots. The pup under her coat gave a small, sleepy sound, and she held it closer, her fingers still buried in the black wolf's fur. She had never been bowed to by anyone. Not by a child, not by a servant, not even by someone asking for help in the kitchen. All her life, people had moved around her like she was a chair left in the wrong place. Now the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories had lowered himself before her, as though she carried a crown no one else could see. Madison's voice came out sharp, but the sharpness shook. "This does not change anything. She stole from the pack. She was banished." Fenrir opened one silver eye. That was all. Madison stepped back so quickly her heel caught in the snow. Emily looked at her, and for the first time, she did not see beauty or power. She saw a girl wrapped in velvet, terrified that the lie she had built would not survive the morning. "I did not steal your brooch," Emily said. The words were quiet, but they seemed to travel through the clearing. "You put it beneath my blanket because the king was coming, and you wanted me gone before he saw me." One of the boys lowered his eyes. The other shifted his weight, guilt passing over his face like a shadow. Madison turned on them. "Do not listen to her." But the forest was listening. The wind moved through the high branches, and the old rope above Emily creaked once, a long, soft sound like a witness clearing its throat. Fenrir rose then, slowly, unfolding to his full height. He did not touch Madison. He did not chase her. He only stepped to Emily's side, so close his shoulder brushed hers, and faced the path leading back to Raven Hollow. From beyond the trees came another sound, faint at first, then growing clearer. Hooves. Many of them. The rhythm rolled through the frozen ground, steady and controlled, not like a hunting party, not like frightened pack wolves rushing through the woods. This was a royal escort moving with discipline. Madison heard it too. Her face changed again, fear sharpening into panic. "We were never here," she whispered to the boys. "Do you understand me? We found nothing. We saw nothing." Emily tried to stand, but her legs trembled beneath her. The cold, the accusation, the long walk through the dark, all of it rushed back into her body at once. She swayed. Fenrir turned instantly and pressed his side against her, holding her upright with a gentleness that made her chest ache. She wanted to thank him, but her throat closed around the words. No one had ever noticed she was falling before. A voice rang from the trees behind Madison. "Lady Vale." Every head turned. An older woman stepped into the clearing, wrapped in a dark green shawl dusted with snow. Martha Reed, the healer who lived near the boundary stones, carried a lantern in one hand and a leather medicine satchel in the other. Her gray hair had slipped loose from its braid, and her face looked tired, but her eyes were clear. Emily's heart tightened. "Martha," she whispered. The healer looked at Emily beneath the tree, at the pup in her arms, at Fenrir standing guard, and then at Madison. Sorrow crossed her face, not surprise. "I warned your father that throwing an innocent girl into the cold would bring shame on Raven Hollow." Madison lifted her chin. She was banished by Alpha order. "An Alpha can make a command," Martha said. "That does not make it honorable." The hooves drew closer. Through the black pines, torches appeared, moving like captured stars. Emily saw riders in dark cloaks, steel glinting at their shoulders, the royal crowns stitched in silver on their banners. Her pulse stumbled. Fenrir looked toward the approaching lights and gave one low sound, not a threat, but a call. The riders halted at the edge of the clearing. Silence fell so completely that Emily could hear the pup breathing beneath her coat. Then one horse moved forward from the center of the line. It was taller than the others, black as midnight, its breath steaming in the pale dawn. The man who rode it wore no crown, but every person in the clearing knew him before anyone spoke. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood sat straight in the saddle, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark winter coat, his white skin marked by the cold, and his silver eyes fixed not on Madison, not on the boys, not on the old tree, but on Emily. Snow gathered on his dark hair and did not soften him. He looked like the North had carved a king from frost and silence. Then his gaze dropped to Fenrir, standing against Emily's side, and something unreadable moved across his face. The king dismounted. No one breathed. Adrian Blackwood took 3 slow steps into the clearing, looked at the royal wolf guarding the banished Omega, and said in a voice calm enough to frighten every liar there, "Tell me why my wolf is protecting the girl you left to freeze." Madison tried to answer, but the sound that left her was too small to become a lie. In the pale blue dawn, with royal banners standing between the black pines and Fenrir's silver eyes watching every breath she took, all her practiced confidence seemed to fall away. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood waited. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The clearing had already bent around him, every rider silent, every horse still, every snowflake seeming to slow before it touched his shoulders. Emily stood beside Fenrir with the pup hidden beneath her coat, her heart beating so hard she felt it in her fingertips. She had imagined the king as a distant terror, a story told over kitchen fires to make Omegas lower their eyes. But the man before her was worse and gentler than the stories at once. Tall enough to make even Madison's companions shrink back, cold enough to turn a room quiet without touching it, yet his gaze, when it finally moved over Emily's torn sleeve and frost-pale hands, did not hold disgust. It held attention that frightened her more than cruelty ever had. Cruelty was familiar. Attention could change things. Madison forced herself to straighten. "Your Majesty, there has been a misunderstanding." Adrian's eyes did not leave Emily. "Then explain it clearly." "She was caught stealing ceremonial silver from our pack house. Our Alpha ordered her removed from the grounds before your arrival. We only came here to make sure she had not wandered into danger." One of the boys flinched. Martha Reed's lantern flame flickered in the wind. Emily looked down, suddenly afraid of speaking, afraid of hoping, afraid that one polished lie could still bury her beneath all the others. Fenrir felt the tremor go through her. The great wolf shifted closer until his fur brushed her arm, steady and warm. Adrian saw it. His expression changed by the smallest degree, but every rider behind him seemed to feel it. "You came to check on her," he repeated. Madison nodded too quickly. "Yes, Your Majesty." With no blanket. His voice remained calm. "No healer." Madison's lips parted. "No lantern bright enough for the trail." His gaze flicked to the boys. "And no one from your Alpha's council." The silence that followed was soft and terrible. Madison looked toward the path as if help might appear between the trees. Instead, another group was approaching, drawn by the royal escort. Raven Hollow's Alpha, Thomas Vale, wrapped in a dark fur cloak, with several elders behind him. His face was tight with confusion and alarm, but when he saw the king standing beneath the hanging tree, he immediately bowed. "Your Majesty, I was not informed you had left the road." Adrian did not return the greeting. "I followed my wolf." Thomas Vale's eyes shifted to Fenrir, then to Emily. Displeasure flashed there before he hid it. "This girl has caused unfortunate trouble." Emily's stomach twisted. "This girl? Not Emily. Never Emily." Adrian finally turned fully toward the Alpha of Raven Hollow, and the air seemed to thin. "Her name?" Thomas hesitated. Martha answered first. "Emily Carter, Your Majesty." The king repeated it once, quietly. "Emily Carter." Hearing her name in his voice did something strange to the clearing. It made her feel visible, as if the snow had stopped covering her and begun reflecting light back onto her face. The pup stirred beneath her coat, and Adrian's gaze dropped to the small silver-white head peeking from the torn fabric. His eyes sharpened. "Where did you find that pup?" Emily swallowed. Caught in wire near the roots, Your Majesty. I freed him. A murmur moved through the royal riders. One of them leaned forward in his saddle. Thomas Vale frowned. That is a stray. She should not have touched it. Fenrir's head turned slowly toward him. The Alpha stopped speaking. Adrian stepped closer to Emily, careful, measured, as though approaching a frightened bird rather than a banished Omega. May I see him? Emily nodded and opened her coat just enough for the pup to be seen. The small creature blinked at the king, then gave a faint sound and tucked its face back against Emily's dress. Something passed through Adrian's eyes then, not softness exactly, but recognition edged with concern. This is not a stray, he said. Madison went still. Thomas Vale's face paled. Adrian looked from the pup to the wire marks in the snow, then to Emily's bare, reddened fingers. This pup belongs to the Northern Sanctuary. He vanished last night during the storm. Emily's breath caught. She had not saved some unwanted creature from the roots of an old tree. She had held something under the king's protection. Adrian removed one black glove and extended his hand, not to take the pup, but to touch the torn strip of Emily's dress wrapped around its paw. His fingers stopped just before they brushed hers, leaving the choice to her. No one had ever given Emily a choice in front of power before. Slowly, she let him examine the bandage. His hand was warm despite the cold. You were freezing, he said, low enough that only she and Fenrir could hear. And still you helped him. Emily did not know how to answer. Helping had never felt noble to her. It was simply what pain taught her to do when she saw it in someone smaller. Adrian straightened and faced Ravenhollow. The calm in his voice hardened into judgment. You accused her without proof. You abandoned her beyond your boundary. And while you prepared banners for my arrival, she protected what was under my care. Madison's eyes filled with panic. Thomas Vale bowed lower. Your Majesty, we can correct this matter quietly. Adrian's silver gaze did not move. No, you made her shame public. Her truth will be public too. Adrian's command traveled back to Ravenhollow faster than the rising sun. By the time Emily was brought toward the pack house, wrapped in the king's own dark cloak with the silver-white pup sleeping safely in her arms, every wolf in the village had gathered along the main road. They had expected banners, music, and a royal procession polished enough to make their little pack seem important. Instead, they watched their alpha walking behind the king with his head lowered, Madison silent beside him, and Emily Carter placed at the center of the royal guard, as if she were the one being honored. The road that had felt endless in the night now stretched before her in painful brightness. Emily recognized every porch, every window, every face peering out from behind curtains. Mrs. Hallow from the bakery, who used to leave burnt crusts for her by the back step. Elder Pierce, who had once told her that an Omega should be grateful for any roof, even one that leaked. Children who had copied their parents and called her cursed before they understood what the word meant. They all looked at her now with the same wide uncertainty, as if she had returned from a place no one came back from, carrying proof that the world was not arranged the way they had believed. Emily wanted to disappear inside the cloak. It smelled faintly of cedar, snow, and something clean like winter air over stone. It was too fine for her shoulders, too heavy with meaning. Every time she tried to slip back toward Martha, Fenrir moved with her, blocking the crowd with his enormous body. The king noticed without looking. Stay where you are, Miss Carter, Adrian said quietly. Miss Carter, not girl, not Omega, not thief. Her name, given shape and dignity. She kept walking. In the pack square, the ceremonial platform had been decorated for the king's arrival. Blue banners hung from the posts. Silver bowls lined the steps. The crescent brooch, the one Emily had supposedly stolen, sat on a velvet cushion near the center, freshly polished and shining like it had never spent a second beneath anyone's blanket. Madison saw it and went pale. Emily saw it too, and her heart dropped. That was found in my bed, she whispered. Martha, standing near her shoulder, answered softly. Then let truth stand where they placed the lie. Adrian stepped onto the platform and turned to face the gathered pack. He did not call for silence. Silence came by itself. Even the restless horses stilled. The king looked across Ravenhollow, and Emily understood why people feared him. His coldness was not cruelty. It was control. He did not waste a breath, and that made every word feel carved into the morning. Last night, Emily Carter was accused of theft, he said. She was removed from this pack before judgment. left beyond the boundary without shelter, and denied the protection owed to even the lowest member of any territory under my crown. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some looked shocked. Others looked away. Adrian lifted the brooch from the cushion. This is the object used to condemn her. Thomas Vale stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, the evidence was clear. Was it? Adrian asked. He held the brooch toward the nearest royal guard. Captain Ellis. A broad man with dark blonde hair came forward and removed a small glass vial from his coat. Emily had seen scent tracing used only once, when a hunter lost a child's mitten in a snowstorm. The captain passed the vial beneath the brooch, then held it to the light. A faint silver mist curled inside. 3 cents, he said. Madison Vale. Thomas Vale. Emily Carter, very faint, likely from being handled after placement. The square went utterly still. Madison's breath caught. Thomas Vale's jaw tightened. Adrian's gaze turned to Madison. You said she stole it. Madison shook her head once, then again, faster. I thought she did. I was told. I must have been mistaken. Emily felt the old instinct rise in her, the instinct to save everyone from discomfort, even those who had never saved her. She almost said it was all right. She almost made herself small enough to fit inside their version of mercy. Then the pup stirred in her arms, pressing its warm nose against her wrist, and Fenrir stood at her side like a living wall. Adrian looked at Emily. Did you take this brooch? Her throat tightened. Hundreds of eyes pressed into her. But for once, someone had asked her directly. She lifted her chin. No, Your Majesty. The words settled over the square with simple weight. No trembling explanation. No begging. Just truth. Adrian nodded once, as though her answer was the only one that mattered. Then Raven Hollow will hear this clearly. Emily Carter is innocent. The crowd shifted, whispers breaking loose like ice cracking on a river. Madison's face crumpled with fear, but Adrian raised one hand, and the whispers died. There will be consequences, he said, but they will be lawful, not cruel. Those who lied will answer before council. Those who obeyed dishonor will learn what honor requires. He stepped down from the platform and approached Emily. The square watched as the Alpha King stopped before the Omega they had thrown away. You protected a life in the cold when no one protected yours, he said, his voice lower now. That is not weakness. Emily's eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Adrian extended the brooch, not as evidence, not as accusation, but as something returned from a lie. Will you hold this until the council is done with it? Emily stared at the silver crescent in his gloved palm. Her fingers shook as she took it. The moment the metal touched her skin, Fenrir lowered his head again, and somewhere in the crowd, a woman gasped. Adrian's eyes sharpened. The brooch glowed faintly against Emily's hand, blue stones brightening like tiny pieces of moonlit ice. Martha whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Old blood remembers." Emily looked up, frightened by the light in her palm. Adrian Blackwood looked at her, as if the morning had just revealed a secret the North had been waiting years to find. The glow from the crescent brooch did not flare like fire. It breathed. Soft blue light pulsed beneath Emily's fingers, gentle as a heartbeat, bright enough to turn the snow around her hand silver. The square held perfectly still. No one in Raven Hollow had ever looked at Emily Carter and seen mystery. They had seen a servant, a mistake, an orphaned Omega who moved through kitchens with ash on her sleeves. Now the royal brooch, polished for a king and meant for a ceremony, had awakened in her palm like it had been waiting for her touch all along. Emily tried to give it back. Your Majesty, I do not know what I did. Adrian did not take it. His gaze remained on the stones, then shifted to Martha Reed. You know, Martha's face tightened with the sorrow of someone who had kept a promise too long. I suspected. Thomas Vale turned sharply. Suspected what? Martha ignored him and stepped closer to Emily, her lantern trembling slightly in her hand. Your mother was not just a kitchen worker from the East Ridge. Her name was Clara Carter, but before Raven Hollow, she was Clara of the Moonline. A low murmur spread through the elders. Emily had heard the word only in children's prayers, never in family stories. Moonline. The old blood tied to healers, sanctuary keepers, and the first queens of the Northern Territories. She shook her head. No, my mother was poor. She mended coats. She sang when she cooked. Martha's eyes softened. Yes, and she hid what she was so you could live quietly. Quietly. The word struck Emily harder than any insult. Her entire life had been built around being unnoticed, but what if that had not been weakness? What if it had been protection? Adrian looked toward the pup in Emily's arms. The northern sanctuary lost him during the storm because someone opened an outer gate. Captain Ellis stepped forward, his expression grave. We tracked small prints south, then larger prints circling back near Raven Hollow. Fenrir broke formation before dawn and came straight here. Fenrir sat at Emily's side, calm as a carved shadow, his silver eyes fixed on anyone who moved too quickly. Madison hugged her cloak around herself. This is impossible. She is just Emily. The words echoed through the square, and for the first time, Emily heard how small they sounded. Just Emily. As if a name could be a cage. As if years of sweeping floors could erase the blood beneath her skin. Adrian turned to Madison. No one is just anything. Then he faced the crowd again. The sanctuary pup was not found by your patrols. Not by your hunters. Not by your alpha. He was found by the girl you cast into the cold. Emily looked down at the small animal. The pup blinked up at her, its amber eyes clearer now, trusting without question. She remembered its small body trembling beneath the roots, remembered tearing her dress with frozen hands, remembered choosing to help when no one would have blamed her for saving herself. Her throat tightened. I only did what anyone should have done. No, Adrian said. You did what many failed to do. His voice did not praise loudly, and somehow that made it feel more real. Thomas Vale stepped forward, desperation cracking through his polished manners. Your Majesty, if her bloodline is what you say, Raven Hollow had no knowledge. We would never have treated her so poorly if we had known she was valuable. The square went cold in a different way. Emily felt the sentence land exactly where it was meant to, dressed as apology, but rotten underneath. Valuable. Not innocent. Not human. Valuable. Adrian's expression became unreadable. That is your confession, Alpha Vale. Not your defense. Thomas lowered his eyes. Madison looked near tears, but Emily found she was not watching them anymore. Her attention had drifted to the edge of the square, where the road curved north beneath the pines. Beyond it lay the world she had never been allowed to imagine. Royal sanctuaries, mountain citadels, halls where her mother's hidden name might still mean something. Fear rose in her, but beneath it was a quieter feeling, fragile and unfamiliar. Possibility. Martha touched Emily's shoulder. Your mother once told me the moon line would return when the North remembered mercy. Emily looked at Adrian. The king was watching her, not like a ruler measuring an asset, but like a man witnessing the first light appear after a long winter. He removed his cloak clasp, a black silver pin shaped like a wolf's head, and fastened it gently over the torn edge of the cloak around her shoulders. Emily Carter, he said, clear enough for every wolf in Raven Hollow to hear. Until the council decides where you wish to belong, you are under my protection. Fenrir lowered his head once more. The pup gave a tiny sound against her heart. And as the blue stones in Emily's palm glowed brighter, the old banners above the square stirred though there was no wind. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter stood in the center of Raven Hollow, and no one told her to move aside. The square remained frozen around her, not from the winter air, but from the impossible sight of the Alpha King's cloak over her shoulders, his royal clasp at her throat, and Fenrir seated beside her like a judgment carved from midnight. The blue stones in the crescent brooch dimmed slowly, but their light did not vanish. It sank into Emily's palm, leaving a faint warmth beneath her skin, as if some hidden door inside her had opened and refused to close again. She wanted to ask Martha what it meant. She wanted to ask Adrian why his wolf had known before anyone else. Most of all, she wanted to ask why her mother had never told her that quiet could be a shield instead of a sentence. But the crowd began to shift, and fear returned to its old pathways. Whispers rose from every side. Moonline. Sanctuary blood. Under royal protection. Emily heard her name carried through voices that had once used it only to blame her, and each time it sounded less like shame and more like a bell being rung from far away. Thomas Vale turned toward the elders, his face tight. The girl belongs to Raven Hollow until the council says otherwise. Fenrir stood. That was enough to make the nearest wolf step back. Adrian did not move at once. He looked at Thomas with a calm so complete it felt like a door closing. She belongs to herself. The words struck Emily with such force that she forgot to breathe. Herself. No one had ever said that about her. Not when she was assigned to sleep in the storage room behind the kitchen. Not when Madison took her mother's shawl and said dead women did not need keepsakes. Not when the Alpha signed her name onto work ledgers as if her time, her hands, her silence were packed property. Herself. Martha's eyes filled, but she smiled through it. Madison suddenly stepped forward, her hands clasped as if humility could be put on like a clean dress. Emily, please. I was frightened. Everyone was frightened about the king coming. I made a terrible mistake, but we grew up together. Tell His Majesty you forgive me. Emily looked at the girl who had thrown poison into her life and called it order. Madison's cheeks were wet now, but Emily could not tell whether the tears came from regret or consequences. Perhaps both. For years, Emily had thought forgiveness meant making the other person comfortable again. She had swallowed pain quickly so no one would have to look at what they had done. But the pup in her arms shifted, warm and alive, because she had refused to look away from suffering. Maybe mercy did not mean pretending a wound was not there. Maybe it meant refusing to become cruel while still telling the truth. Emily's voice shook, but it did not break. I hope you become better than what you did to me. Madison's face lifted with sudden hope. Emily continued, softer, steadier. But I will not lie to protect you. The square seemed to inhale. Adrian's gaze rested on Emily, and for the first time since he arrived, something like approval softened the hard line of his mouth. Captain Ellis ordered 2 guards to escort Madison and Thomas to the council hall, not roughly, not with spectacle, but with the formal dignity of law. That almost made it more powerful. Raven Hollow watched as the people who had controlled every room Emily entered were led away to answer for what they had done. No shouting, no vengeance, just truth walking in daylight. When they were gone, the square felt larger. Emily looked toward the northern road again, and fear rose with the thought of leaving everything she had ever known, even if everything had never loved her back. Adrian seemed to understand without being told. You do not have to decide today, he said. Protection is not a chain. Emily looked down at the pup, then at Fenrir, then at Martha, who nodded as if giving permission for a future Emily had not dared to want. What happens now? Emily asked. Adrian turned his silver eyes toward the old path beyond the village. Now we return the pup to the sanctuary. Then we find out why the moonline woke beneath a hanging tree. At the edge of the square, the wind shifted toward the north, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and something ancient beginning again. The royal road north did not feel like a road to Emily. It felt like the edge of one life pulling away from another with every step of the horses. Raven Hollow disappeared behind the pine trees, its rooftops shrinking into smoke and snow. And for the first time, Emily did not look back because she was afraid. She looked back because she was learning that leaving could hurt even when staying had hurt more. Martha rode in the supply carriage behind her, wrapped in blankets with her medicine satchel on her lap, while Captain Ellis led the guards in a quiet formation along the tree line. Fenrir moved beside Emily's horse without a sound, so close that when the animal grew nervous, the great wolf only lifted his head and the horse settled at once. The sanctuary pup slept in a lined basket across Emily's lap, its bandaged paw tucked beneath its chin. She had offered to hand him to one of the royal healers, but the pup had made such a mournful little sound that even Adrian's stern expression had softened by a fraction. He trusts you, the king had said. So Emily held him as the northern woods opened before them, mile after mile of white pine, frozen creek beds, and hills washed pale beneath the morning sun. Adrian rode slightly ahead, straight-backed and silent, his dark coat moving in the wind. He did not crowd her with questions. That quiet should have made him seem distant, but somehow it gave her room to breathe. Every few minutes, his gaze would shift back, not to command, not to inspect, only to make certain she was still there. Emily found herself noticing things she had never had time to notice before. The blue shadows beneath snowdrifts, the soft sound of leather reins, the way sunlight caught on the silver threads of the royal banners. After nearly 2 miles, the trees parted, and the northern sanctuary appeared in a valley below. It was not a palace. It was gentler than that. Wide stone lodges stood around a frozen lake, their roofs steep to hold the snow, smoke curling from chimneys in peaceful gray ribbons. Fenced meadows stretched beyond them, and inside those meadows moved wolves of every shade, some limping, some old, some young enough to tumble through the snow like laughter made visible. Emily's chest tightened. A place for the wounded. A place where no one was thrown away for being less than perfect. The pup stirred as if he smelled home. When the party reached the main gate, an elderly keeper with silver hair and a weathered face hurried forward, worry carved into every line. The moment she saw the pup in Emily's arms, her hands flew to her mouth. "Little Rowan," she breathed. Emily carefully lifted him from the basket, but the pup did not leap away. He pressed his nose once against her wrist before allowing the keeper to take him. The gesture was so small, yet Emily felt it like a thank you spoken directly into her heart. Adrian watched in silence, then turned to the keeper. "Who opened the outer gate?" The keeper's joy faded. "We still do not know, Your Majesty." The latch was not broken. It was lifted. Captain Ellis exchanged a grave look with the king. Emily's fingers curled around the crescent brooch inside her pocket, its warmth still faint against her palm. "Someone wanted him to run," she said before she could stop herself. Every face turned toward her. Heat rose in her cheeks, and she almost apologized. Adrian did not let her finish the thought. Emily swallowed. If he ran south in a storm, someone may have hoped he would be lost near Raven Hollow. And if Fenrir found him with me? She looked down, the rest too impossible to say. Adrian's voice became very quiet. "Then the same night Raven Hollow tried to erase you. Someone forced the sanctuary to reveal you." The wind moved over the frozen lake, carrying a soft chorus of distant wolf calls. Martha stepped from the carriage, leaning on her cane, her gaze fixed on the old stone arch above the sanctuary gate. Symbols were carved there, half hidden by ice. Emily recognized one from the glowing brooch, a crescent wrapped around a pine branch. Martha touched the stone with trembling fingers. "This place was founded by the moon line," she whispered. The brooch warmed suddenly in Emily's pocket, then glowed through the fabric with blue light. Across the sanctuary, every wolf turned toward her at once, not in threat, but in recognition. Fenrir lowered his head beside her. Adrian stepped closer, his silver eyes reflecting the same light. "Emily," he said, softer than she had ever heard him, "I think the North did not bring you here to answer for your past. I think it brought you here to remember who you are." The blue light from Emily's pocket spread across the sanctuary gate in thin, trembling lines, touching each carved symbol as if waking old memories from stone. Wolves gathered along the snowy paths, silent and watchful, their ears lifted, their eyes reflecting pale winter sun. Emily stood at the center of it all with Adrian Blackwood at her side, Fenrir before her, Martha behind her, and for the first time the attention of others did not feel like a hand pushing her down. It felt like a door opening. She drew the crescent brooch from her pocket. The stones were no longer merely blue. They held tiny flecks of silver, moving inside the light like stars beneath ice. The elderly keeper sank slowly to one knee, not from fear, but reverence. "The sanctuary recognizes her," she whispered. Emily's breath caught. Around the courtyard, one by one, the other keepers bowed their heads. Not deeply, not like servants before a ruler, but like people greeting someone who had finally come home. Emily took a step back, overwhelmed, and Adrian moved only enough to steady the space beside her without touching her or trapping her. "You do not have to carry every answer today," he said. His voice was low, meant for her alone. "You only have to decide whether you want the truth." Emily looked past him to the frozen lake, where the wind dragged ribbons of snow across the surface. A day ago, truth had been whatever powerful people said loudest. She had been a thief because Raven Hollow needed her to be one. She had been cursed because Madison needed someone beneath her. She had been nothing because no one had bothered to look closer. But the pup was safe. Fenrir had chosen her. The brooch had awakened. And the king of the North had stood before an entire pack and said she belonged to herself. Emily closed her fingers around the crescent. "I want the truth," she said. Martha released a breath that sounded almost like a prayer. The keeper rose and led them beneath the stone arch into the oldest lodge, where the walls were lined with faded banners and hand-painted records of names long forgotten by ordinary packs. At the far end, above a hearth glowing with calm amber flame, hung a portrait of a woman with light brown hair, pale skin, and gentle eyes that made Emily stop walking. Her mother, not in a kitchen apron, not bent over mending work. Clara Carter stood painted in a silver cloak, one hand resting on the head of a white wolf, the same crescent symbol at her throat. Beneath the portrait, careful letters read, Clara of the Moon Line, last sworn guardian of the Northern Sanctuary. Emily lifted one hand to her mouth. The ache that filled her was not only grief. It was love arriving late, carrying proof. She protected this place, Martha said softly. And when danger came for the Moon Line, she hid you where no one would search for a guardian, among those who underestimated gentleness. Emily's eyes burned. She thought of her mother singing while smoke curled above the stove, hands rough from work, voice soft enough to make loneliness feel less sharp. She had not been weak. She had been sheltering a child in the only way she could. Adrian stood beside the portrait in silence, his face unreadable except for the respect in his eyes. The council will investigate who opened the sanctuary gate, he said. Ravenhollow will answer for what was done, but your future will not be decided by their shame. Emily looked down at the brooch, then through the window toward the courtyard where little Rowan played carefully beside the keeper, already brighter, already home. Fenrir watched from the snow, patient as fate. The fear inside Emily had not vanished. It had simply made room for something stronger. She turned to Adrian. What if I do not know how to be what this place remembers? The Alpha King's cold expression softened, not into a smile, but into something steadier. Then learn slowly. The North has waited this long. Outside, the sanctuary wolves lifted their voices, not loud enough to frighten, but clear enough to fill the valley. Emily stepped into the open doorway as sunlight broke over the frozen lake and touched the crescent at her throat. Yesterday, she had slept beneath a tree meant to mark endings. Today, under the eyes of the king, the wolf who guarded her, and the sanctuary that knew her blood, Emily Carter understood that some places did not bury the unwanted. Some places waited for them to rise.